Okay, welcome to another live stream about incremental language development for Wolfram Language. Looks like a simple agenda today. Those are usually deceptive. All right, let's start off with EchoEvaluation. Okay, so.
Is this the prototype build?
It is not the prototype build. Let me start the prototype build. I got a lot of background noise, by the way. That might be Jose.
So
there's some kind of problem with startup, by the way. Can somebody report that? I mean, there's some kind of problem with startup speeds. I don't know what's happening here.
Yeah, I can report it.
And there's something, look at that weird state that's in. Okay, let's just copy over this cells here. All right. EchoEvaluation. Okay, so this is inner. Boy.
So we're looking at this idea of having multiple elements to represent nesting.
So this is an echo within an echo, basically.
Right.
So if I were to write a Fibonacci, oops, that's not what I really wanted, but let me just fill in there. Okay, so here I would say EchoEvaluation of this, right?
Yep.
Okay, so now I say fib of 4. Okay. Let's try. Oh my God, what the hell's going on here? Well, at least I can see Fibonacci numbers coming out with the red, with the orange thingies.
Right. I think you are missing memoization here. Perhaps.
Well, I wasn't intending to memorize. I'm happy recursing. I'm just trying to understand what on earth I'm seeing here.
This is like tree nesting for the EchoEvaluations.
Mm-hmm. So fundamentally, this is a bracketed thing. It's there to there, right? Everything is bracketed.
Mm-hmm.
So that guy goes with this guy here. I mean, it is interesting that we have cell brackets here. And one slightly crazy idea would be to use the cell bracket structure to nest these things. Is that obviously totally bonkers?
You mean the same on the right or adding new brackets on the left somehow?
I was thinking of the same on the right. Just literally have the cells nest somehow. Sander on our live stream is saying, should the echoes be inside out or outside in?
Yeah, in
I
the
think
terminal
it's the correct.
example.
Yeah, go ahead.
If you go down, there is a terminal example in which the guillemets go to the right.
What? No, the guillemets go to the left here and to the right on output.
Oh, sorry. I misinterpreted the question.
They're growing to the right as you nest deeper.
Oh, I see.
Whereas in a notebook, they grow to the left.
Well, we don't have a lot of choice in the terminal, do we? Now, the alternative here, for the one below, let's see. Oh, that's an echo matched with, oh God, that's another problem. You know what, we cannot have the same color for echo and for EchoEvaluate. We got to have different colors, otherwise this case is going to get crazy ambiguous, right? If you have an echo, you don't know if the echo closed and EchoEvaluation pair, whether it's its own separate echo. So Billy, we need another color for this.
Okay.
And I feel like maybe we should just make both of these matched in color. Could we try? Could you mock something like this with what's an appropriate color for? What is our evaluation color? I don't know, try maybe a burgundy.
It's like,
Go ahead.
I guess it's visually lighter than an input. It's not this, you know, it's the same color, but it's visually lighter.
Oh, I see what you're saying. You're suggesting something like this, something like the in-out labels. That's a good idea. Yeah, that's a good basis for thinking about this. Yeah, why not? Go ahead.
Last week we were thinking that the guillemets were very similar to the left and to the right, and that's why we wanted to have different colors.
Well, we can have slightly different colors. It raises the question of whether I mean, I have to say, one of the things that's been a long-term issue of mine, okay, it's a weird point, but the numbers in here are very hard to read. Now, I don't think we want to further emphasize them, but I don't know if there's a way to make them more readable, maybe give them extra space or something. But, you know, I'm like, when I'm using, you know, I use this ridiculously high resolution screen. Usually, you know, I often have to peer forward to see these numbers on the screen, which I don't have to do for any other thing that's in the notebook. So I mean, that's the thing, Billy. That's the thing for you probably. You know, is there a way to improve readability without improving emphasis of those numbers? And to me, the main thing is what you really want to read is the number. You know, the in-out, you can kind of see it's in or out. And it might be, you know, maybe it's a kerning issue with the number. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah. That it might be helpful to space it out a little bit.
Let's do some experiments on that. Okay. Okay, with respect to these. Okay, how crazy is my cell bracket idea? It's pretty crazy, actually. It wouldn't even work. Because, yeah, it wouldn't even work. Now, what about the possibility? Is there any way that clicking on these could do anything? Is there any way, if this isn't totally bonkers, that we could put in cell tags so that that thing could find its pair, so to speak?
And some number, following also the idea of in-out with some little number that matches.
All right, hidden number. I mean, that would be very useful to me if I could click this and it will find, you know, it will highlight or jump to or something. Actually, Brian on our live stream is just suggesting, Billy, just a thin space on either side of the number in the in-out. That might be a really good, simple solution.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. It just as a character. Would be,
yeah.
Yeah.
Could also have a tooltip.
Oh, that's a good point. That that is a good point, that this thing could have a tooltip with it. That is a really good idea. A tooltip with the thing just bigger or something.
I think Brett suggested that last time. I guess it would be like show the output itself on tooltip.
Wait a minute. So which output? You mean of one of these out labels? But you can see the output. It's right there. Look, the real thing we want, honestly, what we really want is click to copy. That's what we really want, because that's what you want to do, is you want to use out3, right? And you want to click to copy and it comes out as %3. And in our % modernization scheme, there'll be a more elaborate thing to happen there, but that's the immediate thing, and that could go to the user assistance meeting. Okay?
Yep.
I'm suggesting click to copy there.
Yeah, I meant for the echo evaluation. Like if you moused over the input expression, then it could maybe show the output expression in a tooltip.
Oh, I see.
I don't know.
Well, let's be clear. The output expression could show the input expression, but absent time travel, it might not be possible to do the other thing.
Right.
Okay, but even the, okay, so look, all right, we've got 4 different things going on here. Okay. Billy is dealing with the idea of thin space here. Somebody is consulting with Path about the possibility of making this click to copy. Who's doing that?
I can send that to Parth.
Okay. Okay, down here, okay, come up several suggestions here. So Sander is suggesting, and he's making a reasonable point, that I can blow this up. Let me do 10. Actually, it's not as stupid as it might be, but it is stupid at some level because you can't really tell how big these are. So Sandra is suggesting that above level 1, that it's actually just a little number there.
And the number is cumulative. It's not the number of parentheses, say. Right? So if we, you see what I mean? So if we end evaluation 2, we don't open evaluation 2 again. It will be evaluation 3.
That's going to get weird. Where does it start counting? At top of Al? At the and what happens in
the beginning of each evaluation, beginning of each cell?
So that's in the main evaluator. I think that's going to get weird. I mean, we've already got something like this with dialogue input. This case is weird.
I sent a link to Echo in documentation, which if you, as just sort of like a point of reference, make it sort of mobile width and narrow it, you could sort of see the ins and outs next to the echoes. I don't know if this is a good example or not, but.
Why is this different then from Echo? If I did this with ordinary Echo, it would look different then. Are you saying if I did Echo instead of Echo evaluation, it would do something? So if I merge in here, if I say something like, I mean, let me even make it even more confusing. Let me echo that first piece there. Let me just do the 6th case here. Oh boy. I don't know what the heck is going on here. Okay, so there's echoes mixed in with echo evaluations. Okay, so first of all, let's talk about technology that's possible, okay? So first point is, can we highlight the matching one? I believe that we can by putting a tag in here and by putting code that will essentially search down in the notebook to find the corresponding tag. The tag is to UUI, if the tag is UUID, then you can do that. Somebody is complaining the font is too small to read the text. Somebody should figure out how to adjust their view of this, because this is already expanded 150%. Okay. So question about interfacing with .NET. Absolutely, there's a whole .NET link. This is not the subject of this meeting at all, but somebody can point you to that. A very elaborate system for doing that, for using Wolfram language from .NET. Somebody is suggesting an accessibility zoom thing for using 6K displays, and I'm simply going to send that to my systems person because I don't know, and we're not dealing with that right now. Okay. Okay, let's come back to this. Okay, look, what are the suggestions on the table? We've got, okay, so first of all, if I click this, we should be able to, even into the future, we should be able to find its pair. Make sense?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. Second point is, here, because we're dealing with the past, we could burn in here the knowledge of its paired input. See what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Sandra's pointing out we need to, yeah, look, this confusion with ordinary echo is hopeless, right? So we're going to assume that the colors here are based on the in-out colors. And so now the question that we have on before us is basically, how do we do this pairing? You know, what is the least obscure way to do the pairing of in-out labels? I mean, of echo, in echo, out echo here. Okay, I would say that for small numbers of nesting levels, that this, you know, whatever it is, different, you know, military ranks or whatever these things are, isn't bad. The problem is when you get very deep, it's going to be hopeless. Make sense? So the question is, when it gets deep, do we want a method option or something that allows us to, you know, to control kind of what happens here, or how do we want to do it?
I think I would use a number. When we go more than 3, say, we just put a little number in front or before.
Okay, what is that number going to look like? You mean in front of these things? So we go 3 deep, which means, and so I don't understand, because right now we're mixing some echoes in here, right? So these echoes are lined up, the echo marks are lined up with the right-hand edge there. Right? These are outdenting here, and obviously if they outdent too far, they have to indent this content. So
Right.
maybe what we do is we outdent until, what do we do? 2 levels, 3 levels? I don't know, and then we go to numbers. I mean, there's an excuse to go to numbers, which is when you would have to indent the content if you were going to have that many, you know, whatever they are, you know, stripes.
So for example, we could use 3, and then 4 is Guillemette, a little 4 Guillemette, something like that.
Yes. That's understanding. That's called Guillemettes. I know they're called Guillemettes, but I don't know what the relationship is to. Is that term? I'm not even gonna ask. Well, I am gonna ask because I'm curious.
The single one of those is caret. I don't know if.
What's your point? That we use a single one rather than a pair?
Maybe.
That is not a useful
I think
definition.
You want MET.
Yeah, that makes sense. No. Well, there's a word we're missing. Okay. Okay. So what are you suggesting here? I mean, you're suggesting that we have forward-pointing things like this, which have a sandwich of a number in between.
Do large outputs do something like that also? Or is it the ellipsis on either side am I thinking of?
Yeah, that's the ellipsis for a large output. Ugh. That's a little different. Yeah, Sandra is suggesting something which looks like n Guillemot Guillemot. I'm not a big fan of the paren n thing because I think we don't really have that motif of a parenthesis meaning something like that. Well, although it doesn't look bad. I mean, so the question is, are we doing that? Or are we doing something like this? I think a stylized thing like this, if the design could work, is pretty reasonable. Billy, your comments?
Yeah, if I like having the number there initially, if we could do that.
No, we don't want to do that. If there's just a single echo evaluate. Okay, so look. The question is, does it go, a single one is this, a double one is this, a triple one is this. Does that make sense to people?
Yep.
All right, Billy, and can you, while this meeting is going on, can you try and make a design for these?
Okay.
And let's take a look at them, okay? I would recommend, I mean, something based on this, color value, but I don't know whether it's lightened or what. And then we're going to have to make sure that it plays nice with Echo itself. Okay.
Yeah.
And then in terms of, it's a luxury item to figure out how to get something. Okay, the mouse over of the input seems doable here, and we should look at that. Okay, I think that will be an Ian thing, right? To actually look at the implementation of that.
Yep.
In terms of the back in time idea of jumping to the, in terms of the jumping forwards in time, let's investigate that. I think that requires some input from somebody in the front end team. Okay.
Sounds good.
Okay, why did the label get quotes around it?
You need to do that in the prototype build.
Oh, yes, thank you. That's the answer. Sorry about that. Okay, so a question here would be, right, so these labels would then go to the teal color. Brian is saying, should the echo indicators be similar to the in-out symbology? I sort of think they are, but maybe... See, because remember, they're going to nest. They're going to be different echo evaluations. It's not quite what, it isn't the same kind of thing, because, yeah, okay, Sandra is pointing out that a skeleton object is of the form, looks like something like this, but I don't think it's going to look like that. Let's see what Billy comes up with design-wise. All right, can we go on? Array reshape automatic dimension. So we had that very good discussion yesterday about broadcasting and other things, which hopefully we can bring to one of these meetings soon, right?
Yep.
I think it was a very useful discussion, but complicated. Now, how does this relate to that?
This is much smaller. It's a small detail. It's about the alignment of reshape layer and array reshape. So it has been pointed out that reshape layer can handle automatic and compute the missing dimension, which I find useful. I mean, if you have large objects, you can say, oh, I want an object of these new dimensions, compute the other one so that they match. And so reshape our layer can do that, but array reshape cannot.
Okay, so what you mean by that is I'm trying to, so this array reshape is something that essentially has, it is doing like take list, but it is putting it in successive levels. Yes, I mean, that seems highly sensible to be able to have automatic there. Highly
it's like
sensible.
the inverse of flattering.
Right, it seems highly sensible. I don't have any problem with that.
Okay. So there is one detail, which is array reshape supports padding. And so by default, if you ask for more, something larger or something smaller, it will pad appropriately. So what's the meaning of automatic when it's going to pad? It's the no padding, it's the minimal dimensions with no padding, or the minimal padding, say. So I think it should be no padding, but just wanted to confirm.
Yes, I mean, wait a minute. I believe it's no padding, but what if you can't do it? What if there's prime numbers and things? What happens if there's primes? Do you understand my question? Oops.
So you see there how the last submatrix is a matrix of zeros? It padded.
I see. So if I did, for example, if I did here 3 times 4, but this thing was 31, then what the heck is that doing?
Well, you ask for less. You ask for something in which the result is smaller. So
oh, I see. So if I did automatic there, and what's the relationship to partition? How does array reshape relate to partition? Is it a deeper partition, so to speak? I think it is.
In a sense, so
it's a recursive partition. Go ahead.
I think partition doesn't specify the final dimension. It's just the blocks you want, and it will break things into those blocks. While here you can also specify the last one.
Okay, but so in the case where we said 3, 4, or 3, comma, what am I doing? 3, 4. I'm now totally confused. What
add another 3, 3, 4, 3. And you see how at the end it padded with a few zeros.
How do I specify the padding?
The third argument, add an X at the end.
I see. Okay, so you're asking if I said
automatic for 3, I think it would choose 2 because 3 cannot, it would have to pad.
This automatic thing is a little weird. I mean, so I could put any automatic for any of those, and if it is a perfect fit, then no problem. But if it has to pad, it would choose that number which leads to the minimum padding. Is that what you're saying? Or
no padding at all. So it's the smallest, it's the largest thing that can enclose inside.
Okay, but if it's the automatic is not the last argument, that works. But if it's the last argument, why wouldn't it just always end up with singletons there? Because it can always do. Am I very confused?
No, it would choose the smallest number that. No, sorry, the largest number that it makes the whole thing, the whole result not to have any padding, any padded result.
But the fact that it's an intermediate automatic.
Yes, we can have only one automatic.
Okay. But so it takes the largest number for that position that leads to no padding. But what if there is no padding solution that doesn't drop data?
You mean even one put?
Look, if the only solution is to put a 1 there, it's a total mess. But even that might not work, because then it still has to be a multiple. The total length still has to be a multiple of the last index, the last dimension length.
No, so I think in general cases, there will always be a solution. It's just that it might be 0. For example, if you start with range of 13, and then you have 3, 4.
Yeah.
No, sorry, range of 11, and then 3, 4, comma automatic.
It isn't implemented, is it?
No.
Okay.
But this case, even if it chooses 1, you would be asking for something of size 12, but you only have 11 elements, so it would have to pad 1s. So in that case, it would have to choose 0 and returns an empty array.
What on earth happened here? That's pretty lame. All right, explain to me again what this is going to return. 3, 4 automatic. What's it going to return in this case?
In this case, with the rule of no padding, then it will return an empty array, a 3 times 4 times 0 dimensions. So
what will it actually return?
Do constant array of 0, 340.
0,340. Yeah. That's what it'll return?
Yes, because in this case, there is no solution with padding, without padding, sorry. And with no padding, this is the possibility.
Boy.
But this is a very corner case. I mean,
I'm good with doing this if it just generates an error message in the case where where it doesn't fit, where there isn't a solution.
Okay, so the 0 case, it could error out, yeah.
Well, I think that it should error out whenever, if there's a solution for automatic here that is just an integer and it fits everything perfectly. In other words, if this thing here has a length which is the product of, those things and an integer here, then it's great. Just do it. If it doesn't fit, I think for now it should error out.
Okay. I was trying to have some sort of up to situation in which it does its best.
Well, fine then. Let people say up to there. If that's what you want to do, then just say up to whatever. I recommend just implementing the thing with automatic, with it erroring out in the case where it doesn't make a perfect, an integer fit. And then let's play with that a bit and see what happens. Maybe there's a way to do up to. But I think this is super confusing. I think you're off by 1 and the thing blows itself up. It seems wrong.
We can do that.
Okay. All right, should we move on here? Is
Yes.
Billy ready to tell us about more EchoEvaluation or not yet ready?
No.
Okay. All right, let us know when you're ready. No problem. Okay. Calendars.
Okay, so I will explain a bit and then Nick will take over. So
Okay.
we are extending...
By the way, Nick, I do want to just say, the things I sent you from our outside enthusiast, please make sure we understand how to provide feedback there. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Give us some introduction here.
Yes. So Nick and I have been working with an intern on the extension of the calendar system, and we have now a large collection of new calendars, more than 40 from the 4 we had before. And what we want to discuss, we want to show you how it works, and we would like to discuss the extension of calendar data. which
Okay.
is the natural function to include all these new calendars, but it had a slightly different design. So we have a calendar data underscore new page. So there are two different things to see here. The aspect of the new calendars, which follow geoprojection, so it's a list of string comma parameters, rules, and then the design of calendar data. So Nick, can you explain?
First of all, do I need to remind myself what calendar data is right now? I didn't even know.
So right now, calendar data is set up pretty exclusively around holiday calendars. So exchange calendars and different national holidays. So as you can see, the null argument case basically lists which countries there are.
That's pretty lame.
Yeah. It's something where I think, that function probably should have been called holiday calendar data or holiday calendar lookup.
What is holiday calendar?
Holiday calendar is the option for selecting holiday schedules. So, if you're doing a fit of financial data from the New York Stock Exchange and you want to make sure that you're not interpolating over holidays, you need to know what the New York Stock Exchange holiday schedule looks like.
So just to get a sense here, are you suggesting that, clearly in terms of compatibility, we can clearly, are you suggesting that this is holiday calendar, that we change this to basically holiday calendar data and that this becomes, historical or I don't know, what, okay. All right, let's see what you're proposing here. And
Yeah, so basically what we'd like to be able to do is to be able to look up some data about these date calendars. And calendar data seems like the natural place that we would want to do that. And
we could call it calendar system data.
Or calendar type data.
I would say calendar system. I think it's better than, it's analogous to is it analogous to geoprojection data, or what is the thing which stores datums?
Geodesy data. But I think this is the equivalent of geoprojection data. So to me, calendar is the equivalent of geoprojection.
Okay, so calendar system seems, I wouldn't have a problem calling it calendar system if we're.
But why not calendar data?
Well, because we've already got something else called calendar data, but let's cross that bridge in a minute. What about Holocene, Halocene? Which one is it?
Sorry, Holocene.
On both sides. Okay.
Yeah.
What the heck is an arithmetic calendar system? Oh, as opposed to an astronomical calendar system.
Yes. So we have a little blurb at the beginning. Most calendars are based at least somewhat on an astronomical system, but the arithmetic ones use, fixed arithmetic formulas rather than looking at the position of the moon and the position of the sun from a given location, where the ones we call astronomical calendars do some sort of astronomical.
Okay, so the other ones just use the year, basically.
They have fixed rules.
Yeah,
so
fixed rules.
What they have done is to take the periodicity of the sun and the moon and approximate it by some fixed rules, which of course get misaligned after thousands of years.
Yeah, but who's counting? Right. That's
some
what
of them
happened.
are very good.
Yeah, Pope Gregory fixed all that at some point in the 1500s, right?
Yes, but it will get misaligned again in like 10,000 more years or 4,000 more years, I think. It's very funny. We have discovered that Newton created a better one.
Is that right?
Yes, Newton has his own calendar. That I didn't know.
No, I didn't know that either.
And it's very funny. It's like the Gregorian calendar, but instead of 400 years, it's 500 years. And then every 5,000 years, there is a year with 2 leap days. And this is perfect to 100,000 years or so instead of a few thousand years.
Oh, well, people should have paid more attention to old Isaac. He was always complaining about that, from all accounts. I think he was into these non-commensurate things. He invented this non-commensurate weights for British coins and things like this. Huh. Okay.
Yeah,
It's
so
always
Newton,
interesting. Yeah, go ahead.
Newton was responsible for the mint in England in 1700, in the year 1700, which is the first time that the Julian and the Gregorian calendars had to differ. So it was his decision what to do. And I guess he said, well, if we are going to change this, let's do it correctly.
But then nobody did it, right?
But nobody did it. No, nobody paid attention to his calendar. I mean, and England eventually changed in 1752, not in 1700.
Wow. Fascinating. Yeah, well, one always finds these things. Like Newton was also involved in the first math textbook for high school. And at least, first sort of modern times math textbook. Again, one doesn't know about these things. Okay. All right. So what's the question here? So the end result here is.
So the first thing we need to see, which is in the agenda notebook, is how we express non-default parameters of calculus.
Some of this is crazy. Location geoposition 000. That's crazy, if I might say so.
Yeah, that should
be all or something.
Well, it should be omitted for calendars that don't actually. The Gregorian calendar doesn't have a location parameter, so it shouldn't be there. But for an astronomical calendar that has a reference.
But also it's a geolocation, right? And that's one thing. Okay. Next question is, what happens for a calendar on Mars? I mean, I hate to plan ahead, but what does happen? Who on earth is going to make that? Somebody should do that.
There is actually, I mean, there are pages on Martian time for sure. So here we have to distinguish, in the same way that in Geo we distinguish projection from datums, here we have to distinguish calendars from time systems. And time system is the one that will provide Martian time. Now, Martian time can be expressed in other calendars.
But wait a minute, the Martian year, I see, Martian time as in something based on a point on the Martian surface with some number of sols that's aligned to sols. Is that right?
Right, exactly.
But somebody can define Martian months and so on, right?
Well, we would have to look at the moons of Mars, perhaps.
They're very small.
I'm not sure that's done. I've never heard of Martian months, but certainly of Martian time.
Well, somebody's going to need Martian months at some point. I have to say, I'm adding this to my list of student projects for next year's summer school, is for somebody to make up a Martian calendar. It seems like a good thing to do.
Well, they will have two concepts of months because they have two moons. That's going to get funny.
Oh, yeah. Great.
It's a bit like the Mayan calendars, in which every day they increased two numbers. So the numbers were moving simultaneously, not periodically once only.
What about the moon? The moon has no meaningful, that's a much crazier situation because it's months and it's days. It's totally crazy. Okay, so let's come back to this. All right, so what are we figuring out here?
So I think our motivating factor is we're adding a bunch of calendars. There's some information you want to look up about them. We need some sort of data function to both list what calendars are available and what the default parameters are. For a lot of calendars, you have similar default parameters. Most of the time they start at midnight for any of the arithmetic calendars, but some start at sunset or at sunrise or noon the day before or the day after. And some calendars default to having a year zero, some default without it. And right now, that detail, we basically just have to have a documentation note, and there's no way to control for it. And with the parameterized calendars, you can say, I want a Gregorian calendar that does include year 0, or that starts at sunset instead of at midnight, and you can basically
All right. Okay.
automatically
So
account for it.
let me make a couple of suggestions. So first of all, I don't know why this isn't an association here. And I would strongly suggest that what we do is we have basic names like Gregorian, but that we then have as an alternative to just Gregorian, we have this be an association where it says something like calendar system arrow Gregorian, year choice, I don't know, year origin, arrow, whatever, blah, 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 blah. Is that making some sense? So in other words, that instead of doing something like this, that we basically puff out, we say these are the, the Mayan Tzolk'in calendar has some defaults, but then if you want to, you can give a more parameterized version of that.
Right. Yeah, and that's the notion of how we've extended the calendar framework in general, is that, if you want to do conversion between a Gregorian calendar with year 0 versus one without, you can basically specify both of those. You could do the same thing with the Tzolk'in calendar. So I think using an association probably makes sense there too.
Okay.
You can't custom define your own calendar randomly based on parameters, because
no,
there's
we're
a
giving
lot
you
of other
particular
mechanics.
parameters.
Yeah, in the same way that geoprojections, you can't arbitrarily specify a new reference geoid or something like that, but you can change the centering or something.
How does that work for the geoprojections? We're doing that. It was a pre-association design, right? And we might want to update that.
So the idea is, again, we have Mercator, for example, which is using the default parameters, and then you can change the parameters, centering.
How do you change the parameters? You say
the first example. For example, you see the bone projection. So that's a specification again of the default. So that reports the defaults. You can copy that, change centering to 4020, and that's
are these strings or are these
all those strings? All strings.
We should change this to an association. I think.
I think everything should be supported.
Yeah, I agree. But the output from geoprojection data, the default output, okay, so this is a geogrid position with that geoprojection.
Exactly, with default parameters. Now you can replace that bond in the second argument with the output of the first example, and it will be the same numbers.
Right.
But if you change now the centering to 4020, it will give you different numbers.
Right, and that's its way of specifying bond with centering 4020.
Right, it realized that's the only parameter you changed with respect to the default, so that's what it keeps.
Although that means there's no canonical geogrid position object in general. In other words, it's putting in well, I guess it is canonical if it just includes whatever differs from the from the defaults. Okay, that makes sense. Okay, so let's not compound them as the sort of the primitiveness of not using associations here. It seems to me.
Okay.
All right, so what you're doing, this is a direct copy of this. So this is saying, so the location would be omitted in this case, or it would say all.
Yeah, it should.
What does location? So location. Hold on a second. Location is for a lunisolar calendar or something. Location. I mean, if you're in Mecca or not in Mecca or something, it matters, right?
Right. It's basically the reference point for any solar or lunar observation. So the Persian calendar typically uses Tehran as a default location for all measures, but you could have a variant that uses another place in the Persian Empire, or it could be on the other surface, anywhere on the surface of the globe. The difference between the Chinese, the Japanese, and the Korean lunar calendars is just what the reference location is by default.
I see. Okay. All right. So let's walk through this again. So in general, then date object is going to have an argument which specifies, or an option value that specifies which of these things it's talking about. Is that correct?
Yeah, so calendar type already supports the named calendars of Gregorian, which have default parameters assumed, but you could specify a calendar with non-default parameters. I could say, again, using Gregorian as an example, I want a Gregorian calendar that does include year 0 because our default doesn't.
Okay. So in other words, okay, so then what does date object auto canonicalize, or does it sit? It sits in whatever the calendar specification that's been given here. And how do you convert it? Do you just say, do you wrap it in a date object with a different setting for calendar type?
You can, or you can use calendar convert explicitly. We'll take a data object with a calendar.
What is calendar convert? Is that new?
Nope, we introduced that in 9, I think. If you don't do a lot of conversions between different types, probably don't come across it as much, but yeah.
I see, okay.
Both forms work, so we both allow the sort of geoposition model of changing datums directly within a wrapping object or doing an explicit conversion.
All right, okay. So what we've got here, so in a date object, we can't use yet the holiday. Can we use the, the Japanese stock market's holiday calendar, or is that not? Do we specify that in the date object or not?
We don't, because a holiday calendar is really defining the criteria that define whether a day is a holiday or not. It doesn't change the fundamental representation of the date itself.
Okay, so what then gets the information that we're talking about the Japanese stock market calendar or something?
Generally date range, date round, day plus, etc.
So what is there? Do they have an option, and what's it called?
So yeah, they have a holiday calendar option, and basically holiday calendar affects what is and isn't a business day and what is and isn't a holiday. Those are 2 day types within our framework.
There is some discussion in the agenda, at the end of the agenda, and you see the functions that have that option.
Okay, calendar convert works with these defining which day you're talking about calendar stuff. Is that correct?
Correct.
And right now, calendar data works with holiday calendars.
Correct.
I think the concept of holiday calendar is incorrect. It's more like a holiday criterion. So I think the confusion is that holidays are expressed in a given calendar, but whether one day is a holiday or not is independent.
But what do people call it? In the finance world, they call it a holiday calendar, don't they?
Yes, but with the sense of collection of holidays.
Yeah, I understand. But so what we've got is these 2 functions: holiday calendar data, or calendar, which is now calendar data, and we've got the holiday calendar option for functions that have weekday and things like this in them. Is that right?
Yep, that's correct.
Okay. Oh boy. And we've also got okay, so like that stuff that George was looking at, that is historical calendars. That was yet a different thing, right?
Yeah, that's related. It has a couple of related aspects. One is like the switch between calendars. So the switch from Julian to Gregorian,
right, which we should know for a given. I mean, honestly, that could be in country data. Should certainly be in historical country data. It should probably be in country data. I don't know whether that's a question for Alan, whether that should be in country data or historical country data. I mean, we have that data in Wolfram Alpha for sure.
In
the switch times. Okay.
Sweden's a particularly complicated case because they switch twice. They switch from Julian to Gregorian, back to Julian, back to Gregorian. So there's not
when did they do that?
I don't remember the specific dates off.
Right. So then basically what you're telling me is for a given country, and I'm sure the borders of those countries were different and all kinds of weird stuff like that.
Yeah. And lots of parameters have changed over time. The notion of when the year starts, you go far enough back, it's generally mid-March. And within March, it moves around before we sort of settled on January 1st being the beginning of the year. There's a lot of tendrils in historical dates. Some of the things like these parameters controlling for year 0 are important because that there is no universal standard for the Gregorian calendar handling year 0 or not. Half of the standards have it, half of them don't, because technically it's only valid for years after 1582. But everyone...
Right. Extrapolated Gregorian is a different issue.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Okay. So first question is, what are we doing? I mean, so the concept is, one thing that's even more confusing is holidays. When there are religious holidays that are based on a lunar calendar, how does that relate?
So the holiday criteria are often calendar specific. So Easter is really hard to express in terms of criteria on the Gregorian calendar, but it's really easy to express on the ecclesiastical calendar. It's so many weeks relative to Lent. And so for a lot of our current version of holiday calendar basically has schedules that are based on each calendar. And we'll say for the US, there are these holidays that exist using these Gregorian date patterns. These ones exist using the ecclesiastical date patterns.
Okay, I understand. So, all right, so we've got the storage of the holiday data for a given country. Is that static or does that have to be, in general, is that like an entity property type thing?
It is. It's currently not exposed through entity value. It's its own packlet, but it does periodically update. New holidays will get added for some exchanges, or the exchange will be closed for some specific reason.
What about two exchanges within a country that have different holiday choices? Mm-hmm. Does that happen?
It does. So if you do that example there of holiday calendar United States, there's a different schedule for government bond, NASDAQ, NERC, and New York Stock Exchange.
Okay. All right. Okay. All right. So this is just the wrong use for calendar data. We can grandfather it, but it's the wrong use.
Yeah. And so we were thinking, does having a standalone holiday calendar data function make sense, or should it?
I don't know. Yeah, but the thing that you give it is not United States. I think what it is, it's an entity that is a holiday authority, so to speak, which might be NASDAQ or something like this.
Right.
I think that's ultimately what it should be tied to. Now, we can give people convenient strings and so on to access it, but ultimately that's what it should be.
Yeah.
And then so that's a holiday calendar type or something. Holiday.
Holiday schedule entity or something like that.
Yeah, standard holiday schedule. I don't know whether there might be some term for it in the ISO standards world or something like this. Let's look that up. But I think fundamentally there's an entity, and the property of that entity is its holidays. And that is going to have to be parameterized because it's going to be by year, because somebody may have added, I don't know. Let me not make undue. In the U.S., somebody could decide that or in any country, many countries will be much worse than the U.S. in this regard. That somebody, the heroic day of so and so. Well, like Columbus Day in the U.S., for example. What was a heroic day for a while is no longer a heroic day, or is a heroic day again. And so the holidays will clearly change year to year. When I lived in England, it was always entertaining because even the daylight savings time stuff jumped around depending on political party and so on. But so my point is, that holiday calendar data will have to also know the year in general.
Right.
But I think what it needs is a criterion, and the criterion is aware of the year. It will say it's all the 4th of July, but in this year, or starting this year, or except
Well,
this
so what are
year.
you proposing? You're proposing that the functions that manipulate dates, that care about whether something is a holiday or not. I mean, they know an absolute date, so they know it was the year 1752 or something, right?
Right, but we are going to have this new function called date select, which takes a period and then a selection criteria and extracts the sub periods that obey that criteria. So,
Okay.
so what I think a holiday is here is just a criterion of selection, not a calendar. Because, for example, imagine that you have the ecclesiastic calendar that Nick was talking about before. There may still be different churches, different religions that use the same ecclesiastic calendar to define different sets
I see.
of holidays.
Right.
So the important thing is the name of the holiday set or holiday criterion, not the calendar itself.
I understand. Well, okay, so what is this? It's holiday. I mean, it's partly a holiday authority, but it might be a holiday source, but what we're trying to name here is two things. We're trying to name the option a new name for what is now the calendar type option when it is being used for that purpose, as opposed to what might arguably be called a calendar system, which is what I claim calendar data should be calendar system data, or maybe date system data. I don't know. What is that? Does that make any sense? Instead of calling it calendar at all, or is it really always called calendar?
I think for what we want, I mean, the new calendars are true calendars, the equivalent of geoprojections. It's the holiday calendars that seem misnamed.
No, I agree. So I mean, the new calendars, well, the question is, do we really want to call it calendar data, or do we want to call it, is it a calendar or a calendar system?
I think it's a calendar. Everybody refers to them as calendars.
The literature tends to refer to it as a calendar.
All right, okay. So then what we're talking about is calendar. So calendar convert is talking about this type of calendar that we are now discussing, right? So this is calendar in the sense of calendar system.
Right.
Okay. Now the option is, however, really, so we've already got a holiday calendar option.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so it probably, why don't we just call it holiday calendar data? I mean, I understand that I mean, in principle, you could complain that that's not a calendar, it's really a criterion for a holiday, but I think it's good enough to call it holiday calendar. And then what that takes is, this is crazy, in my opinion. I think what we should do here, I mean, we should just be able to say NASDAQ. Can we do that right now for calendar data?
Right now, it doesn't accept it because there's the unfortunate precedent that there's a bunch of defaults associated with different countries. I don't think any of the exchanges should have overlap, but
you mean there is a NASDAQ in somewhere else?
No, I don't think any of the exchanges have duplicates, but all of the countries have a default that's given, which is duplicated. But I think in general, you should be able to provide NASDAQ. And I like the idea of migrating away from country names to instead going to holiday calendar sources or holiday.
Well, okay, the default is the country's, the government calendar, right?
Right. I mean, there's also the distinction, like in the US, between a national holiday versus a federal holiday. And
gosh, what is the difference in those?
So generally a federal holiday would be any time that the post office is closed.
I see.
where a national holiday generally has official observation.
I see. So the national one is the one that we want to be the default.
Yes.
The federal one is just related to the U.S. government.
Right. That may be
And
an
then
extra
there's
thing we want to have in there.
Well, and the other thing is U.S. states have their own holidays.
Yep. Yeah.
Like Massachusetts has one.
Patriots Day. Yeah. So we can presumably balloon out a bunch of extra holiday authorities or holiday calendar sources and populate those with holidays from administrative divisions or countries or exchanges.
Right. And the default then for calendar data would be to use, given an administrative division, it will be the not the federal, not the state government, but the states. Like I think in Massachusetts, there are holidays which are like the national holidays, they're recommended holidays for organizations. They don't happen to necessarily coincide. They're not the local, Fish and Wildlife Office or something might take a different set of holidays.
Right.
Okay. All right. So fine. So then calendar data becomes and so this return from this default case of calendar data, this would disgorge, just like geoprojection data. If I say geoprojection data at Mercator, that will disgorge that. I see. That gives what you would feed in as the fully qualified object, right? It's a little bit of a weird form here. And I'm wondering whether we should actually return something more like in modern, more modern thing like Mercator, arrow, and association. What do you think?
Well, any equivalent syntax is fine. I mean, this is just what is there since version 7. And we didn't touch it in version 10 when we started our whole of Geo.
Okay. Well, we just need some consistency. But right. I mean, insofar as this is going to be fed into other places, we can have anything we want return. But insofar as this is directly used, if it is anywhere, that's a problem if we change the format.
I'm sure some functions, are used in this output. It will have to be updated.
I mean, it would be nice to be able to just get this output.
We can control it with a second argument, different formats.
As a suggestion of a person who'd be useful, the discussion on calendar data. Can somebody make a note of that on the live stream? Yes, Devin, could you get that, please?
Yep.
Thank you for the suggestion. Okay, look, what I suggest is that, what is the second argument to geoprojection data right now?
The properties.
Okay, that's fine. Okay. So the properties then are things like centering and so on, right?
Exactly.
Okay, fine. So then what I suggest we do is we make the default return be a pure association. Whatever we call this, whatever you want to call this, projection type, arrow, Mercator, and then all the rest of it. Then one of the properties becomes something like classic or legacy or traditional or something to give this return result. Then, there's a question about the discovery interface for calendars. And I think what we're tending to do is to put in WDR, put in the data repository, just lists of everything we have so that that's well discoverable. And so it isn't, right now, this idea is, in my opinion, a little bit crazy. I mean, I guess we can support this. I just think it's a little bit, it's fine. We can support it. It's kind of a hack. But then these become not countries, but the names of all the different, this will be completely different. This will be the names of the genuine calendars and holiday calendar data, right, would be essentially this, but with these things now turned into the holiday calendar entities, which would include things like NASDAQ and Massachusetts state government or whatever else.
Okay.
Makes
Yeah,
sense?
I think that's cleaner, and it keeps the language and function names consistent across their usage.
Fine. Okay. All right. So we've agreed on that. So then holiday calendar arrow, and then the name of a holiday calendar can stay in those functions.
Yep.
Okay. All right. So let's go back here and just look a little bit at this. So I suggest that the default return from calendar data then becomes an association like I'm suggesting for these other things. Makes sense?
Okay. Do you want it to be an association like the Mercator then goes to value, or do we want an association that says calendar type goes to Gregorian and then?
No. I'm suggesting this. Yeah, calendar type goes to Gregorian, blah blah blah. That's what I think. Okay, now, so I think that deals with that. And now, okay, we got a bunch of funky calendars here. So those calendars then have options, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then this would become the association if they are non-default cases. If it's just Gregorian with its default values, it's just the string Gregorian. If it's non-default, it becomes the association with all the non-default things filled in.
Yep.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Then and that option can stay as calendar type, right?
Right, because it's consistent with calendar convert and calendar data then still.
Fine. Okay. Then, okay, so I want to put another thing in here, which is I think we should be able to have, so where do we look up the UK 1700? What was its calendar in use? How do we look that up? So, I mean, let me give you a very practical point. I mean, in, historical documents of around that period, like Newton's birthday, okay, is something in January 1642, and that was NS, new style. In OS, old style, it was December 25th, 1641, I think. Okay? So in other words, that is a common thing to do for dates around that time in historical documents, is to write old style or new style, meaning Julian or Gregorian. So we need some way to mirror that, but we also need some way, by the time we're at 1800 in the UK, we are definitively in Gregorian calendars. So I'm just saying we need some way to represent all of that stuff.
Yeah, so I think there is a natural way to do that. It would be in historical country data. We would use dated of England, year, calendar.
For what? I mean, like the Battle of Hastings or something. When was that? I don't even know what date that was, but it shows I was not paying attention. I don't think they ever mentioned a date. Maybe it's not known what the date was. It must be known what the date was because of the time of Halley's Comet.
Yeah, it's known.
Okay, in any case. So, but that, let's see, what were you just saying? You were saying that...
So I think there are two different questions here. One is the question of what's the calendar that was being used in England at this time? And the other one is, give me the date of the Battle of Hastings in this calendar.
Okay, fine. But so the first question is, for a battle like that, okay, let's find out what we actually say it was. Fascinating, but now what actually is that?
Right, so that's assumed to be
that.
Right. So most probably that's the right day in the wrong calendar. That would be my guess.
I talked to Alan last week a bit about some of this historical data stuff, and he's having Ben and a few people investigate and make sure that we're properly curating the historical dates with respect to the right calendar.
Okay, but so this should have in it Julian calendar.
It probably should, yeah.
Okay, and so what should happen is in the display here, we should know, I think, for, you know, gosh, this is difficult because some places only switched, you know, like after 1900. Like, didn't Russia only switch after 1900? Okay, so in any case, what I'm saying is for some dates, okay, it will be good. So this in its raw date object should say calendar type Julian or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
And then in the display form here, I would argue that it should give, like, for example, that day of the week is going to be completely wrong if it's the wrong calendar.
Right. But the location doesn't really matter. So if you know it's in the Julian calendar, you know exactly which day it was. Now,
I agree.
It may be that it happened in a country in which they had already changed, but the days we uniquely identified.
Yeah, so long as it's not one of these calendars that depends on astronomical observations and things.
Well, it's like projections. If you don't say anything else, we are assuming the defaults. If you wanted different defaults, it was your fault not to add them.
Yeah, well, fair enough. Okay, but so one point is that the actual curation of... See, the problem is what happens if you convert from a date that was in Julian calendar and it referred to something in England, right? But then...
So, no, this is like when we return units different in the US and in Europe. So this is the same thing. Somehow we have to know that for this date, we should be returning Julian, or we should be returning.
Okay, I understand. But if you were to convert it to something which is a lunar calendar, for example, or one of these astronomical calendars, don't you have to know where the date refers to in order to be able to do that conversion? I guess you don't.
No.
I guess it's just tough luck. It's whatever you're converting into is what you say.
Exactly.
Okay, fine. All right. So yeah, the answer to Brian's question: date object already has a calendar type in it.
Yep.
As we see there.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So this should probably say paren Julian calendar here. This will be the curation of the Battle of Hastings date. Should say it's Julian calendar, and then when you display it, it should say paren Julian calendar.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's the correct way to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Now, an idea we have considered, but we haven't implemented yet, is to have a notion of calendar which is mixed. It's a calendar, it's Julian from this date to that day, and from this date is Gregorian. And then it will do the right thing depending on the date you are working with. It's an idea that also happens with projections, and we don't have it either. They are called interrupted projections. And you use Mercator in this area of the world and Bone in this area of the world.
Okay, I think that's a future luxury item.
Exactly.
Okay. There are questions here about what's our source for actual ultimate truth of times. That's a complicated issue having to do with leap seconds and all kinds of things, and we are coming to that very soon, right? That's not this version, but the next version. We're planning to do all of that UTM time stamping stuff. Is that right, Jose?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's yeah, there's a question of what happens okay. All right, so let's just all right, what else do we have to figure out here? I think we're pretty close here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that pretty much squares away everything we were looking at immediately here. We may have some revisions to do on the names of the parameters. I don't know if like start of date or start of day and year zero are the names we want to use, but those are easy.
Okay, so just I'm sorry, just a recap on the ones which are locale dependent.
Mm-hmm.
How is that going to work? So in a data object, we will be storing, we will store an association, and this association includes the location it says calendar type arrow association, and that association contains the location, right?
If you're using something other than the default, there's an implicit location for the astronomical Persian calendar that is Tehran, but if you want to use a different location, you just specify it as part of the calendar type.
Okay.
And it'll be carried around inside the data
Okay,
object.
and then calendar convert, if you were to give it, you could give it as a different location potentially, and it would convert that calendar.
Yep. You could have every other parameter in the calendar be the same, but change the location, and it would change the numbers associated with that date because they would be shifted slightly.
Okay. Hey, question. What is the way of generating, for example, for Jewish calendar, of generating things in Hebrew?
Right now, we keep things in their transliterated form. We are looking at potential ways of having the date format be something you can specify and say, I want this in Hebrew. There are complications with Hebrew and Arabic being right to left languages potentially, but
I'm just throwing up my hands there. Yes. Okay. That's horrifying.
Yeah,
all right.
I think technically with Japanese dates, if you're using a formal imperial calendar, they're supposed to be top to bottom, but it's pretty standard to go left to right. So writing scripts always end up with complicated edge cases, but we do have curated forms, both transliterated and in the native scripts for each. And so we just have to find the right interface to switch between those two.
Okay, question. For some of these, historical calendars. So if you say calendar type, arrow country, no, we're not going to be able to do anything with that. Are we going to be able to do something with that? Because there is presumably an official calendar for most countries. Is that stored in country data? Or does every country in the world now have Gregorian as the official calendar?
I think Saudi Arabia was one of the last ones to adopt it, but there's some, like the Icelandic calendar is still used in Iceland to some degree. It uses the Gregorian year instead of the traditional Norse year, but
all 200,000 people who live there.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
So I don't know if more.
I'm sure that's more of. I don't remember. Times I've been there as a tourist, I don't recall seeing any particular. I would have expected that would be of high tourist value, a different calendar, but I didn't.
I know in Japan, I think the imperial calendar is still technically the proper calendar. So, this is currently Heisei year 16.
And what?
So the imperial calendar has a dynasty, so basically the name of the currently reigning emperor.
Okay, I was going to ask about regnal dates.
Yeah,
okay?
So
that's an issue for Roman times, I think Babylonian times as well. What are we doing with those?
So we can, in principle, have those exist as calendars. So the Roman calendar itself also can be used kind of as a date formatting element in terms of how you write on the Julian or Gregorian calendar, or in principle other calendars. But
wait a minute, we don't want every single Roman emperor as a calendar type.
No, but we could potentially have a Roman regnal calendar that says, this is the 14th year of Caesar's reign.
Oh, I see what you're saying. I see. So in other words, it would be a generic regnal calendar in which one of the things, instead of a location, it would be who's the emperor type thing.
Yeah. And that's typically how, if you get a passport in Japan, the date will be written out as the nth year of this emperor's reign. And that gets complicated because it can switch mid-year. The switch from Showa to Heisei was on like January 3rd. So there are 3 days of 1 year that are in one imperial reign, and the rest of the year is in another one.
Okay. So, but why don't we, look, since we already have, for leader data, which is slowly making its way into the language out of just Wolfram Alpha, we should have all the information we need to make regnal calendars. Is that not true?
I haven't looked closely at leader data, but it seems in principle, yeah, we should, in terms of extrapolation, the standard thing is just to assume whoever's the current leader lives forever until you have to update the packlet.
Oh, gosh, that's a mess. Yeah, right.
They're typically used more historically than they are for something that happens.
Yeah, I don't think it's really the nth year of Hammurabi is probably not worth where we could say we're in the year 4000 of Hammurabi or something, or whatever is correct. Okay, but anyway, why don't we just check that this design does not break down? Sounds like it's going to work for regnal dates. Are there any other weird types of dates? Types of calendar systems?
There are some headless calendars, so like the Mayan Tzolk'in and Mayan Hob calendar typically run, I think, in 72-year cycles, and then traditionally they don't keep track of what cycle number it is. But for our implementation, if you want to be able to convert back and forth, we have to keep track of it. So that's what we do.
I don't think we should worry about that. I think they just weren't thinking ahead.
Yeah.
Just 1 second on the Martian calendar question of whether this completely breaks down, because obviously the geomodel, we have a concept of geomodel which can go, which can include Mars. What do we do for this?
I guess we could have a parameter for
right, which is going to change the year length and so on, right?
So I think it's just one more time system. In the same way that we put Mars in the place of a datum, and then everything in geo works, the same thing will happen here with time systems. So time systems will play the role of datums in the same way that calendars play the role of geoprojections.
So here, this just works, right? If I say Mars,
no, not with geomodel. Here it's not an option. It's an argument.
To this, so we say comma Mars like that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. So then if I say geographic,
you can do geographics with some range.
Geodisk of that, comma 50 miles. Is this going to show? Okay, cool. And presumably GeoEvaluation also works for that.
Sorry, what?
GeoElevation data also works for this.
Yes, we do have elevation data for Mars.
Right. Okay. All right, fine. So I mean, we're probably not going to worry about this. Somebody on the live stream mentioned that there is some known proposed calendar for Mars. Might be fun at least. Okay. Okay, somebody is commenting that they write software for a scheduling system. Well, maybe it's time to use Wolfram Engine to power all the horrors of converting calendars. Okay, all right. I think we wrapped on this. And I think did we have something from Billy here on that earlier discussion about the design of these evaluation echo things?
I did send an email, yes.
Okay, great. And so we are done on the calendar discussion for now. Is that correct?
Yeah,
yes.
I think so.
Great. All right, let me just pull this over here. All right, so this is your proposal for I don't think that looks bad. I could think that could be a little bit smooshed up, although maybe that loses on exactly the thing I was complaining about with the ins and outs. What's this? That's an ordinary echo. I don't think that should go purple. I think it's fine like this. If you're really mixing evaluation ones with just regular echo ones, let's not change the color of echo. We've had that for a couple of versions. I think it's a nice color. Okay. I think this looks good. Wait. What did you do with these? Are you recoloring the actual output?
Yes, but
well, that's an interesting idea, but I don't think can we do that? I mean, we could set a different style for evaluation echo output. Are we doing that for any of the other echo stuff? No, I don't think we should do that here. I don't think we should do that at all.
Yeah, only the labels should be colored.
Yeah, I think
the
so.
Output.
So we should check that that's not going to look stupid with the output. I mean, it is conceivable we could use a different size for the output, but I don't think we should bother. The
fact that the input and the output have the same color One complaint we had last week is that they looked similar when there are very many. And so we decided to have different colors.
Maybe we just use black for the results, but the befores, we leave them like this or gray.
No, wait a second. It's not obvious we want to change the styling because that's a big, complicated, cascading mess with different style sheets and dark mode and who knows what else. Right. So the question, so what we're thinking is we leave this, we don't mess with this. All we're doing is the prompts.
Okay.
Right. So the only question is whether the prompts, I don't think there's consistency to having, I don't know. I mean, I think we should try it like this. I agree that it's a little bit similar. The input output. Yeah, I mean, whether this is an easy case for in out because we've got this whole cascade of different depths, right? If we've just got in out, etc., they may look very similar. What could we do there? Is there a way that we could change slightly the saturation of one of them or something like this? Like for instance, the input one could be slightly lighter than the output one. That makes sense, Billy?
And then the text on the right is
black. Text on the right is always black. Always black, okay? So we're only changing the prompts.
What are we doing with the labels?
Which labels? These ones here?
If we add a label argument. So like scroll down.
Yeah, I understand. The labels should be in the same color, I think.
Okay.
But I think you should try yes. Okay, so I think that's what, try slightly lighter for the input and this color for the output and labels in the same colors, matching the colors of the whatever. By the way, what does it look like when you have a label for EchoEvaluation? You're going to have two copies of that label, right? Or can you have a label, different label for the input and the output?
You can do either.
Okay, fine. Okay, all right. We should wrap here. Actually, I'm going to answer one other question from the live stream from Mohammed, asking about Wolfram engines for Android. I'm probably the only person in this meeting who actually knows anything about that because it's a meeting about a completely different subject. The answer is that the actual engine, the raw kernel engine, we actually have had available for Android for a long time, although it's something for developers and it's not on the kind of consumer list. In terms of the Wolfram, the notebook player, that's available on iOS. It is not available on Android. That was a huge amount of work, and it's not going to be available on Android anytime soon. So that's really an iOS thing, and it's really neat. I use it all the time. You can get sent a piece of email that has a notebook as an attachment, and you can open it and interact with it on your phone. It's really nice, but sadly, that took like 7 years of development work. So it's not the kind of thing where we can just flip it around and do it for Android. It's very deeply interwoven with the UI technology of that particular system. And in terms of deployment of Wolfram engines, that is something that's possible on Android. And if people are actually interested, they should contact our partnerships group. It's that's a different story, but that's not providing a proper notebook UI in that system. All right, that was utterly irrelevant. We went from the calendars of Mars to the Android deployment. Okay, good stuff. Very nice work, by the way, on the calendars. That's I look forward to playing with that some more. And I mean, how close are you to really like everything, every calendar that's seriously been considered? I mean, are we far away or are we quite close?
The codes are working for all of them.
No, I understand that, but I mean, if I just ask, the French Revolutionary calendar, do we have it?
Yep. We have two versions of it.
Okay. What do you mean two versions? They tried at different weeks.
There's an astronomical version and an arithmetic approximation.
Okay. But so you think this is throughout history, this is basically all serious calendars that have been used. Is that true?
Not yet. There's probably, We've probably another 20 or so that we have reasonable
what
documentation on.
what types of places are they from?
I mean, there are like whimsical ones. You know, people have proposed like Stardate calendars from
Yeah,
Star
but that's
Trek.
that.
but
Okay,
not
that's
really-
amusing, but
yeah.
that's not critical. But what about ones that are actually in historical documents and so on?
For example, an issue here is that the Chinese calendar, which we have one version, has changed about 50 times in the last 3,000 years.
Okay.
So there are
But
reforms.
so there's documentation about the other versions, yes?
Somewhere, yes.
Yeah, for some of them at least.
Well, but I mean, Emperor so and so in 500 BC or something. Is it just known? Somebody knows there was an edict to change the calendar, or is it actually known what happened? And if there are no documents, we don't care. In other words, the case where it's interesting is where, you're looking at a historical document and it has a date on it. What does the date mean?
This is really complicated to do in full. So for example, there are details like when they started the Julian calendar, they got it wrong at the beginning. And for like 15 years, they were adding a leap year every 3. And then they had to stop adding leap years for a decade because they had made it wrong at the beginning. I mean, if we want to consider all these details, I have a book in my office, which is just about the calendars used in England in the last 2,000 years, a full book dedicated to it with all the exceptions, just for England.
Right. Okay. All right.
So I mean,
it's a piece of frozen history, basically, which is quite complicated. All right. So, well, something to look forward to for the future. But I mean, I think the main issue is, so you're saying that a Julian date, well, when was that? For the time of Julius Caesar, or what? They got it.
Yes.
So he got it wrong, basically.
No, he got it right, but implementers misunderstood. The problem is that the Romans didn't have a 0, and so their counting system was very complicated.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Yes,
okay.
And I mean, the Roman counting is, for example, days to the calendars, and the days of the calendars, they called it so the day before the calendars, they called it the second day to calendars.
Weird.
It's very weird because for them, what we would call the day 0, for them it was the day 1. So yeah, so of course they had a system which was very prone to errors by 1.
Huh. Fascinating. Okay. Is it known? I mean, just as a history trivia question. I mean, is it known? Like, is there an extant, proclamation from Julius Caesar about what the calendar should be that was then misimplemented, or is it not? Is that?
It's documented. I mean, it's documented that they had to do this. I think it was for the first 3 times. They did it every 3 years, and then they realized they were doing it wrong. They had to stop for like 7 years without any leap day or something like that. This is written in various places.
Right. Fascinating. Okay. Well, all right. Well, so we are just doing the first cut here, which is going to get the 99% or much more than that case, and something for the future to deal with all of the weird historical corner cases. Mm-hmm. All right, sounds good. Okay, great. Somebody is commenting. Truth Teller is commenting on get an intern to translate that book into code. Yes, indeed, exactly what I was thinking. And maybe George, who was looking at some of these things as a hobbyist, would be interested in doing that. Perhaps we should suggest that to him. Okay. Anyway, that's all right. Thanks a lot, guys. See you all soon. Thanks to folks on the live stream. Great comments.